There's a painful reality many people only understand after the damage has already been done. Most betrayals never begin physically first. They begin emotionally, quietly, and almost invisibly beneath the surface of the relationship. Long before another person enters the picture openly, emotional loyalty often begins shifting somewhere else internally. The problem is that most people do not notice these changes when they first begin happening. They dismiss the signs because they desperately want the relationship to still feel safe, stable, and emotionally secure. Deep down, though, the energy already feels different. Conversations no longer carry the same warmth. The emotional closeness slowly weakens. The reactions become colder, shorter, and strangely distant. Yet many people continue convincing themselves they are simply overthinking, because accepting emotional reality feels far more painful than denying it. Welcome back, everybody. And before we continue, help this community grow toward 100,000 subscribers, because every single person here truly matters. If you enjoy conversations about female psychology, attraction, emotional behavior, and relationships, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss future videos. One thing many people misunderstand about cheating is that it almost never appears suddenly out of nowhere. Emotional separation usually begins quietly beneath the relationship, long before the relationship officially breaks apart. A woman often starts disconnecting internally before the outside world ever sees visible proof that something has changed. During that stage, her communication patterns, emotional reactions, habits, priorities, and overall behavior slowly begin shifting in ways that become impossible to ignore once you understand the psychology behind them. Today, we're going to break down 5 attitudes women often develop when they are emotionally investing themselves outside the relationship or hiding emotional attachment somewhere else privately. And before people misunderstand this conversation, let me make something very clear. Not every emotional change means betrayal. People experience stress, emotional exhaustion, depression, frustration, and personal struggles for many different reasons. But repeated emotional patterns matter psychologically. When secrecy, emotional distance, defensiveness, coldness, and personality shifts start appearing together consistently, it often signals that something deeper is already changing underneath the relationship emotionally. The very first attitude shift usually begins so subtly that most men completely ignore it in the beginning. In fact, many people only connect the dots later, after the relationship has already become emotionally damaged beyond repair. Suddenly, her phone becomes emotionally more important than the relationship itself. Now, realistically, everybody uses their phone constantly today. Social media, work, entertainment, texting friends, all of that is completely normal. But psychologically, there is a massive difference between normal phone habits and emotionally protective phone behavior. When a woman begins emotionally investing herself somewhere she knows she should not, her relationship with her phone often changes immediately. The phone suddenly stays face down constantly. It remains locked all the time. She carries it everywhere, even into places she never cared about before. Bathroom, kitchen, another room, even beside her pillow at night. And the emotional energy surrounding the phone changes too. She becomes nervous when notifications appear, defensive when you casually touch it, and emotionally tense over simple, harmless questions. And honestly, this happens because the phone stops being just a device psychologically. It becomes the emotional bridge connecting her to the excitement, attention, validation, or emotional world she is hiding privately. That is why secrecy suddenly increases. She is not only protecting conversations, she is protecting the emotions attached to those conversations as well. And many men notice this emotional shift long before they ever discover direct proof of anything. The energy around her phone simply feels different. You can sense the nervousness even when nothing obvious is happening outwardly. That uncomfortable instinct matters more than people realize, because emotionally healthy relationships usually do not require constant secrecy around basic communication. Another important sign is emotional attention shift. Her emotional focus becomes glued to her phone while slowly drifting away from you. She reacts faster to notifications than to conversations happening inside the relationship itself. Her excitement seems stronger online than at home. And over time, that emotional contrast quietly destroys trust long before the truth ever fully reveals itself publicly. The second attitude shift is emotional irritation that suddenly seems to appear out of nowhere. Conversations that once felt simple and peaceful slowly start turning into arguments. Questions that used to feel normal suddenly trigger frustration, impatience, or defensiveness. At first, many men convince themselves she is simply stressed, emotionally overwhelmed, or having a difficult week. But over time, the emotional tension keeps growing until the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Psychologically, this often happens because emotional conflict creates internal pressure. When a woman is emotionally attached somewhere else, while still remaining inside the relationship, she often carries guilt, secrecy, fear of getting caught, emotional confusion, and emotional distance all at the same time. That pressure slowly changes the way she reacts to everyday situations. Simple questions suddenly feel threatening because her nervous system already feels emotionally defensive constantly. And instead of calmly reassuring you, irritation becomes the automatic reaction. Over time, this emotional instability slowly forces the relationship into constant tension and emotional exhaustion. You ask where she has been, why she suddenly came home late, who keeps texting her so often, or why she feels emotionally distant lately. Instead of calm communication, the reaction immediately becomes defensive or emotionally explosive. Suddenly, your concern becomes the problem instead of the emotional changes you noticed in the first place. And over time, this creates deep emotional confusion inside the relationship because you slowly begin censoring yourself just to avoid conflict. You stop expressing concerns openly, you stop asking questions, you begin walking on eggshells emotionally because every conversation feels like it could become an argument. That emotional shift is dangerous psychologically because it trains you to ignore your own instincts in order to maintain temporary peace. Another thing many people fail to recognize is that guilt often creates resentment internally. Every time you show loyalty, care, affection, or emotional commitment, it reminds her of the emotional betrayal happening underneath the relationship. Instead of confronting that guilt honestly, frustration often gets redirected toward you emotionally. The third attitude shift is actually one of the most emotionally confusing, because on the surface, it almost looks positive at first. Suddenly, she seems happier again, more energetic, more emotionally alive. She starts focusing heavily on her appearance, buying new clothes, taking more pictures, changing routines, and carrying herself with a confidence that feels different from before. At first, many men feel hopeful when this happens because they believe the relationship spark is finally returning. But deep down, something still feels emotionally wrong. Even though her personal energy has improved, the emotional connection between the two of you somehow feels weaker at the same time. That contradiction creates confusion because the woman beside you looks happier outwardly while feeling emotionally farther away inwardly. Psychologically, emotional excitement created by secrecy, novelty, validation, and attention can create a strong emotional high. Human beings naturally respond powerfully to new emotional stimulation, especially when it feels emotionally forbidden or exciting underneath the surface. And honestly, this is why many men describe the experience as emotionally strange rather than obviously bad at first. The woman is still physically present beside you, but emotionally she feels connected to something else internally. The intimacy inside the relationship weakens, while her personal confidence continues growing outwardly. That emotional imbalance slowly becomes painful because you begin realizing her emotional energy no longer feels connected to the relationship itself. Another important detail many people overlook is emotional direction. Her effort no longer seems focused on building emotional closeness with you. Instead, she becomes emotionally more independent while still benefiting from the comfort and stability the relationship provides around her. That imbalance creates deep emotional loneliness over time. You begin watching someone emotionally come alive again, while simultaneously feeling more disconnected from them than ever before. And honestly, this emotional contradiction often becomes one of the strongest psychological signs that emotional investment has already started shifting somewhere else privately, underneath the relationship, long before the truth openly appears. The fourth attitude shift is emotional emptiness during intimacy. And honestly, this is one of the hardest signs to explain unless someone has personally experienced it before. The physical connection may still exist on the surface, but emotionally something feels completely missing underneath it. A woman who is emotionally disconnected or emotionally attached somewhere else often starts feeling emotionally absent even during moments that are supposed to create closeness inside the relationship. Her body may still be there physically, but emotionally she feels far away. Eye contact changes, warmth disappears, affection starts feeling forced instead of natural. Moments that once created emotional connection now feel strangely cold afterward. Psychologically, intimacy usually follows emotional attachment. When emotional investment shifts outside the relationship, physical closeness inside the relationship often starts feeling emotionally hollow too. And honestly, this creates one of the deepest forms of loneliness possible, because you are lying beside someone physically while emotionally feeling completely alone internally. The fifth attitude shift is emotional detachment from the future itself. This is one of the clearest psychological signs that emotional separation is already happening internally, because the way she talks about the future slowly begins changing. Plans that once felt shared suddenly start sounding individual instead. Conversations about vacations, anniversaries, goals, family plans, or long-term dreams lose emotional excitement from her side. Even when she still participates in those conversations outwardly, the emotional energy behind them feels distant and disconnected. Psychologically, people naturally stop emotionally investing in futures they no longer fully believe in internally. And honestly, this is where many men begin feeling the relationship emotionally weakening, even while daily routines still continue normally on the surface. The hardest truth many people eventually face is realizing relationships often end emotionally long before they officially end publicly. That is why emotional awareness matters so much. Not paranoia, not obsession, but emotional awareness that protects your peace before emotional damage becomes impossible to repair.